The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the abandoned coffee shop where Saida Thompson had taken shelter for the night. Her few possessions arranged around her like the remnants of a life that had once included a corner office, six-figure salary, and recognition as one of the most brilliant cybersecurity experts in Silicon Valley. At 41, she possessed a mind that could decode the most complex encryption algorithms and build security systems that protected billion-dollar corporations from the most sophisticated cyber attacks. But 18 months of homelessness had reduced her to sleeping in doorways and scavenging for food, while the tech industry that had once celebrated her innovations continued to thrive without acknowledging that one of its greatest talents was living on the streets just miles from their gleaming headquarters. Across the city in his penthouse office, Ahmed Al-Karim paced frantically between multiple computer screens, displaying lines of incomprehensible code that held the key to either his salvation or complete destruction. His cryptocurrency empire, built on promises of revolutionary blockchain technology that would democratize global finance, was crumbling because the security protocols protecting his investors' funds had been compromised by hackers who were systematically draining accounts faster than his team of expensive consultants could plug the vulnerabilities. With 48 hours remaining before regulatory authorities would freeze his assets and arrest him for fraud, Ahmed needed a miracle in the form of someone who could break the encrypted code that the cybercriminals were using to hide their theft of over $200 million from accounts belonging to ordinary people who had trusted him with their life savings. The coffee shop where Saida had found refuge had been her workplace 6 years earlier, when she was the chief technology officer of a cybersecurity startup that had been purchased by a major corporation for $300 million. She had been instrumental in developing the revolutionary encryption methods that made the acquisition so valuable, but the racial and gender discrimination that pervaded the tech industry had prevented her from receiving the recognition or financial compensation that her white male colleagues took for granted. When corporate restructuring eliminated her position, and depression over her treatment led to a series of poor decisions and missed opportunities, her descent from executive suite to homeless shelter had been swift and devastating. The irony of her situation was cruel beyond measure. The same encryption technologies that she had pioneered were now being used by the very criminals whose activities were destroying Ahmed's business empire, and the solution to his crisis lay in knowledge that she possessed, but which the industry had dismissed as worthless because of her gender and race. The algorithms that hackers were using to hide their theft were variations of systems she had designed to protect data, and breaking their code would require understanding the mathematical principles that she had spent her career perfecting before betrayal and discrimination had stolen her place in the digital revolution she had helped create. Ahmed had been working for 36 hours straight, consuming nothing but coffee and adrenaline as he desperately tried to decode the patterns hidden in the malicious software that was bleeding his company dry. His team of MIT graduates and expensive consultants had failed to make any progress against encryption that seemed to evolve and adapt faster than their attempts to crack it, and the mounting losses were threatening not just his business, but the financial security of thousands of small investors who had believed his promises about creating a more equitable financial system. The pressure was more than professional or financial, because Ahmed's family had invested their reputation and fortune in his vision of using technology to lift people out of poverty and create opportunities for economic advancement in communities that had been excluded from traditional banking systems. His failure would not only bankrupt his investors, but also destroy the credibility of other Arab entrepreneurs who were trying to build bridges between Middle Eastern capital and American innovation. The weight of representing his culture and religion in an industry that often viewed both with suspicion had added layers of stress that were pushing him toward a physical and emotional breakdown. At 3 a.m., with rain still pounding the streets and his security team reporting millions more in losses, Ahmed made a desperate decision to leave his office and walk through the city in hope that physical movement might clear his mind enough to see solutions that had eluded him while staring at computer screens. His path through the financial district took him past the abandoned coffee shop, where a homeless woman sat illuminated by the glow of a laptop computer that seemed impossibly out of place among her meager possessions. Saida had been using the coffee shop's unsecured Wi-Fi connection to work on freelance cybersecurity projects that paid barely enough to buy food, her advanced degrees and decades of experience reduced to accepting $50 gigs from clients who had no idea they were getting advice from someone whose innovations had once been worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The laptop she used was a battered machine, held together with duct tape and prayer, but it was powerful enough to run the sophisticated analysis software that she had written during her corporate career. Ahmed's attention was caught not by Saida's appearance but by the complex mathematical formulas scrolling across her screen, equations that looked remarkably similar to the encryption patterns that had been confounding his team of experts. The sight of advanced cybersecurity work being performed by someone living on the streets seemed so incongruous that he initially assumed he was hallucinating from exhaustion and stress. "Excuse me," Ahmed said quietly, approaching the coffee shop entrance with the hesitation of someone who wasn't sure whether he was about to make contact with a person or a stress-induced mirage. "I couldn't help but notice the code on your screen. Are you working on encryption algorithms?" Saida looked up from her laptop to see a well-dressed Arab man, whose expensive suit and obvious wealth marked him as exactly the type of person who usually crossed the street to avoid interacting with homeless people. Her first instinct was suspicion about his motives for approaching her, because her experience had taught her that wealthy tech executives rarely acknowledged her existence unless they wanted something that only her expertise could provide. "I'm working on cybersecurity analysis," she replied carefully, her voice carrying the professional competence that had once commanded respect in corporate boardrooms, but which now seemed to surprise people who couldn't reconcile her current circumstances with her obvious intelligence and education. "Why do you ask?" The directness of her question and the sophistication of her work created cognitive dissonance for Ahmed, who was struggling to reconcile her homeless appearance with clear evidence of advanced technical skills that exceeded those of his highest-paid consultants. The equations on her screen were addressing problems that were directly related to the crisis threatening his business empire. "My company is under cyber attack, and we're having trouble breaking the encryption that the hackers are using to hide their activities," Ahmed explained, his desperation overriding the social conditioning that might normally prevent him from discussing sensitive business matters with a stranger living on the streets. "The patterns I can see on your screen look similar to what we've been trying to decode for the past 2 days." The admission that a major technology company was struggling with problems that appeared related to her current work created an opportunity that Saida had been waiting for since losing her corporate position, but it also raised questions about whether this encounter was genuine or some kind of elaborate test or trap. "What kind of encryption are you dealing with?" she asked, her professional curiosity overcoming her caution, as she recognized the chance to apply her expertise to exactly the type of challenge that had once made her career both exciting and meaningful. Ahmed pulled out his phone and showed her screenshots of the malicious code that was draining his cryptocurrency accounts, the complex patterns of numbers and symbols that had defeated every attempt at analysis by his team of experts. The moment Saida saw the encryption structure, her eyes lit up with recognition and understanding. "This is a modified version of the Harrington-Chen algorithm," she said immediately, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had identified a problem that others had found impossible to solve. "The hackers have reversed some of the key sequences and added randomization layers, but the core mathematical structure is based on work that was published about 5 years ago." The instant diagnosis of encryption methods that had stumped MIT graduates and expensive consultants provided Ahmed with his first real hope in days, but it also raised obvious questions about how someone living on the streets could possess such specialized knowledge about advanced cybersecurity systems. "How do you know about the Harrington-Chen algorithm?" Ahmed asked, his tone carrying genuine curiosity rather than skepticism, because the accuracy of her assessment was already proving more valuable than anything his paid experts had provided. "I helped develop it," Saida replied simply, her matter-of-fact tone belying the significance of what she was revealing. "I was the lead cryptographer on the team that created those security protocols before my company was acquired, and I was eliminated during corporate restructuring." The revelation that he was speaking to one of the creators of the very encryption technology being used against his business sent shockwaves through Ahmed's understanding of the situation, because it meant that the solution to his crisis might literally be sitting on the sidewalk in front of him, disguised as a homeless woman whom society had written off as worthless. "If you helped create the algorithm, Can you break the modified version that the hackers are using? Ahmed asked, his voice carrying the desperate hope of someone who had been given an unexpected lifeline in his darkest hour. Breaking their encryption wouldn't be difficult if I had access to proper computing resources, Saida replied, already mentally working through the mathematical processes that would be required to reverse engineer the hacker's modifications. But doing it on this laptop would take several days, and I'm not sure we have that much time. The reference to we rather than you suggested that Saida was already thinking of their interaction as a collaboration rather than a simple consultation. And Ahmed seized on the possibility that he had found not just expertise, but a genuine partner in solving his crisis. How much time do you think it would take if you had access to a proper computer lab? Ahmed asked, his mind racing with possibilities about how quickly he could provide her with whatever resources she needed. With the right hardware and software, I could probably have their system cracked within 12 hours, Saida estimated, her professional assessment based on years of experience with similar decryption projects. The main challenge would be processing power for the brute force calculations needed to reverse their randomization sequences. The promise that his crisis could be resolved within half a day created a surge of optimism that Ahmed hadn't felt since discovering the extent of the cyber attack, but it also required him to make a leap of faith about trusting someone whose expertise was undeniable, but whose current circumstances raised questions about reliability and motivation. What would you need from me to make this happen? Ahmed asked, his entrepreneurial instincts recognizing that he was potentially negotiating the most important business deal of his career with someone who possessed the exact knowledge required to save his company. I need access to high-performance computing equipment, specialized cryptography software, and probably 24 hours of uninterrupted work time, Saida replied, her tone becoming more businesslike as she shifted into the professional mindset that had once made her one of the most sought-after cybersecurity experts in Silicon Valley. Ahmed made a decision that would later be recognized as the turning point in both their lives. My office is 6 blocks from here, and I have everything you've described. Would you be willing to come with me right now and start working on this problem? The offer to trust her with access to his corporate computer systems and sensitive business information represented exactly the opportunity that Saida had been hoping for since losing her career, but it also carried risks about whether she could perform at the level she had once taken for granted after months of homelessness and isolation from the technology industry. I'll need to bring my things, Saida said, gesturing to the collection of belongings that represented everything she owned in the world. And I want to be clear about compensation before we begin. The practical concerns about payment and personal possessions demonstrated that despite her circumstances, Saida retained the business sense and professional standards that had made her successful before discrimination and corporate betrayal had destroyed her career. Whatever you think is fair, Ahmed replied, his desperation making him willing to agree to almost any terms that would get her expertise applied to his crisis. If you can break their encryption and help us recover the stolen funds, I'll pay you whatever you consider appropriate. The open-ended commitment to compensation was risky from a business perspective, but Ahmed understood that he was dealing with someone whose knowledge was potentially worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and that traditional payment scales were inadequate for the value she could provide. As they walked through the pre-dawn streets toward Ahmed's office, Saida began explaining the technical details of what would be required to break the hacker's encryption, her analysis revealing not just deep understanding of cybersecurity principles, but strategic thinking about how to counter the criminals' methods that went far beyond simple code breaking. The hackers aren't just using the modified algorithm to hide their activities, she explained as they entered the lobby of Ahmed's building. They've created a distributed system that automatically generates new encryption keys every few hours, which means that even if we crack their current code, we need to stay ahead of their rotation cycle. The strategic insight about the dynamic nature of the security threat demonstrated thinking at a level that Ahmed's expensive consultants had never reached, and it confirmed his growing belief that he had found not just a solution to his immediate crisis, but a partner whose expertise could transform his entire approach to cybersecurity. Ahmed's office occupied the entire 40th floor of a downtown skyscraper, with computer labs and server rooms that represented millions of dollars in cutting-edge technology. As Saida surveyed the resources available to her, Her demeanor shifted from cautious optimism to confident determination. "This is exactly what I need," she said, her voice carrying the excitement of a master craftsman who had finally been given proper tools after months of making do with inadequate equipment. "With this hardware, I can not only break their current encryption, but also create countermeasures that will prevent them from stealing any more money." The promise to go beyond solving the immediate problem to creating long-term protection represented exactly the kind of comprehensive thinking that Ahmed had been hoping to find, and it confirmed his decision to trust someone whose expertise had been hidden by circumstances beyond her control. As Saida began working, her transformation from homeless woman to cybersecurity expert was remarkable to witness. Her fingers flew across multiple keyboards simultaneously, her screens filled with complex algorithms and data streams that revealed patterns invisible to anyone without her specialized knowledge. The homeless appearance that had made her invisible to society disappeared as she returned to her natural element of advanced technology and mathematical problem-solving. "I've identified their primary server location," she announced after 4 hours of intensive analysis, her voice carrying the satisfaction of someone who was systematically dismantling a system that had defeated other experts. "They're routing their operations through compromised computers in 17 different countries, but the core processing is happening from a location in Eastern Europe." The geographical identification of the hacker's base of operations provided Ahmed with actionable intelligence that could be shared with law enforcement agencies, but more importantly, it demonstrated that Saida's analysis was producing results that had been beyond the reach of his previous consultants. As the sun rose over the city, Saida's work revealed the full scope of the criminal operation that had been attacking Ahmed's business. The hackers had not only stolen money from his cryptocurrency accounts, but had also planted malware designed to destroy his company's reputation by manipulating transaction records and creating evidence of financial irregularities that could result in criminal charges. "This isn't just theft," Saida explained, as her analysis revealed layer after layer of malicious code. "They're trying to frame you for the very crimes they're committing, which means that even if we recover the stolen money, you could still face prosecution unless we can prove that the evidence against you was fabricated." The revelation that he was facing not just financial ruin, but potential imprisonment, added urgency to their work. But it also highlighted the value of having someone whose expertise went far beyond simple code breaking, to include understanding the broader implications of cybercrime and digital forensics. By noon, Saida had successfully broken the hacker's encryption and begun the process of tracing and recovering the stolen cryptocurrency, but her work also revealed connections to other criminal operations that had been targeting minority-owned businesses and technology companies founded by immigrants. "Your company wasn't chosen randomly," she explained, as patterns emerged from her analysis. "These criminals are specifically targeting businesses owned by Arabs, Africans, and other groups that they see as outsiders in the American technology industry. The attacks are motivated by racism as much as financial gain." The discovery that the cyber attack was part of a broader campaign of technological terrorism based on ethnic and religious prejudice transformed Ahmed's understanding of what they were fighting against, and it created personal motivation that went beyond recovering stolen money to include protecting other vulnerable entrepreneurs from similar attacks. As afternoon turned to evening, Saida's expertise had not only solved Ahmed's immediate crisis, but had also provided him with intelligence that would help law enforcement agencies dismantle an international criminal network that had been operating with impunity. "For years, we've recovered 96% of the stolen funds," Saida announced, as her computer screens showed cryptocurrency flowing back into secure accounts. "The remaining 4% is probably unrecoverable because it was converted to untraceable currencies, but your investors' money is safe." The successful recovery of nearly all the stolen money created jubilation in Ahmed's office. But the real transformation had occurred in the relationship between two people whose different backgrounds and circumstances had created an unexpected partnership based on mutual respect and shared commitment to justice. "I want you to know that what you've accomplished in the past 18 hours is worth far more than any amount I could pay you," Ahmed said as they watched the final cryptocurrency transfers completing the recovery of his investors' funds. "You've not only saved my business, but also protected thousands of people who trusted me with their life savings. The recognition of her contribution to protecting ordinary investors, rather than just wealthy corporations, resonated with Saida's values about using technology to help people, rather than simply generating profits for shareholders. What you've built here represents exactly the kind of financial innovation that I hoped to see when I first got into cybersecurity, Saida replied, her voice carrying genuine admiration for Ahmed's vision of using cryptocurrency to democratize access to banking and investment opportunities. As they began discussing next steps, it became clear that their collaboration during the crisis had revealed complementary skills and shared values that could form the foundation of a longer-term partnership. I want to offer you the position of Chief Security Officer, Ahmed said, his proposal representing not just employment, but recognition of expertise that had been ignored by an industry that claimed to value innovation while systematically excluding talented people who didn't fit traditional demographics. I'm interested, Saida replied, but I want to make sure that this company is committed to using technology to address inequality rather than just generating profits for people who are already wealthy. The condition that their work should focus on social impact rather than pure financial gain reflected values that Ahmed shared, and it created the foundation for a business partnership that would transform both their lives and the trajectory of his company. Within a year, the cybersecurity protocols that Saida developed had made Ahmed's cryptocurrency platform one of the most secure in the world, while her insights about financial inclusion had helped expand their services to underserved communities that traditional banks had ignored. The homeless woman who had been invisible to the technology industry became one of its most influential voices, speaking at conferences and advising governments about how to protect vulnerable populations from cybercrime, while ensuring that technological advancement benefited everyone rather than just privileged elites. Ahmed's company grew into a billion-dollar enterprise that served millions of customers around the world. But its success was measured not just in financial returns, but in the number of people who gained access to banking services and investment opportunities that had previously been beyond their reach. The partnership that began with a chance encounter during a rainstorm became legendary in Silicon Valley as proof that innovation and expertise could be found in the most unexpected places, and that the industry's success depended on recognizing talent regardless of the circumstances that might temporarily obscure it. Years later, when Saida spoke at technology conferences about her journey from homelessness to industry leadership, she would always credit the night when a desperate entrepreneur chose to trust a homeless woman with his company's survival as the moment when both their lives were transformed by the power of collaboration across social and cultural boundaries. The code that had seemed impossible to crack had been broken not just by technical expertise, but by the recognition that the most valuable solutions often came from people whom society had written off as worthless, and that true innovation required the courage to look beyond appearances and circumstances, to find the genius that existed in unexpected forms.